Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football LSU Position Group Grades. Heading into 2025, I'm fired up for this conversation because it allows me to accurately depict my optimism around this LSU football team rolling into 2025. And basically, my thesis around LSU is that it's one of the most complete rosters that you see in all of 2025. I'm starting to stack these position groups and I'm starting to grade these position groups. The lowest grade I gave for an LSU position group on this roster was a B. And that is a stark difference in terms of how we talked about this LSU team over the last couple of years, where Brian Kelly has had aspects of his football team that were absolutely elite. But he's also had some glaring problems with his roster as well. He's had glaring problems to the extent where you ain't allowed to compete at the highest level of the sport because you had some serious liabilities on your roster. Look at this team in 2025 and say, wait, where is that liability? Where is that massive question we have about LSU? Again, the lowest grade I gave was a B. That kind of shows you how complete this roster is. And I think the conversation now is, hey, what are the position groups on this team that have the ability to be elite? And that's when you start getting into that national championship conversation. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the LSU fans, number one, it's been a blast talking this football team. It's very clear that I am high on this team rolling into 2025, whether we're breaking down portal commitments, talking spring ball. The amount of support y'all have shown has been amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, I got some hot takes in terms of the grades I gave these units. Would love to hear some of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into it. Number one, and really a wide receiver room that I think not people aren't talking about enough. I think when people talk about elite wide receiver rooms, they talk about Ohio State, talking about Alabama. I think there's a lot of buzz around Auburn. Hey, all units that have really good wide receivers. Excuse me, I'm throwing LSU right in that conversation. Now, what makes this wide receiver room special to me? It was a unit that I thought underperformed last year. I just didn't think it was good enough. We thought it was going to be really good, and it just wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. In 2025, number one, I think you have legitimate NFL talent in this room. Whether that's Barry Brown, whether that's Aaron Anderson, who I think might be one of the most underrated players in the country, whether that's Nick Anderson, whether that's Chris Hilton Jr. You have guys that, hey, if LSU had 4 wide receivers selected in the 2026 NFL draft, I wouldn't be surprised. More importantly than that, you have a lot of different kind of skill sets, which is going to allow Joe Sloan to attack defenses in so many different ways. You also have a quarterback that can make all the throws, which is a really important conversation when you're getting into this pass catcher room. First skill set you're looking for. Hey, who are our big bodies that can work vertically down the field, that can attack that deeper third of the defense, that makes defenses respect what you can do working vertically down the field. It's important to have those guys, not only because they can create explosive plays for you, but you're making sure defenses have to play too high safety. Chris Hill and Nick Anderson. Whoever that might be in 2025, I think both will be heavily involved. Both of those cats, very, very good attacking the deeper third. In fact, that's the reason Nick Anderson was brought into this team. Do I think Nick Anderson is the most complete wide receiver in the country? No, you could argue that he's a little bit of a one-trick pony right now in terms of working vertically down the field, but that one trick he has is elite. And it's a really important skill set to have in your wide receiver room. Then you have guys like Barry Brown and Aaron Anderson, who are some of the most electric pass catchers in the country with the football in their hands. Now, how does that work hand in hand? Why is it important to have 2 different skill sets like that? Hey, if you got guys that can work vertically down the field that defenses have to respect, well, you're opening up a lot of space underneath for guys like Aaron Anderson and Barry Brown to get the football in space and make it happen. When you have those 2 skill sets, you become a very difficult wide receiver room to deal with. I think LSU has that. I think they're pretty deep. I think they got a very good tight end room, whether that's Bauer Sharp, whether that's Trey'Dez Green, 2 guys that have some different skill sets, but both will be very productive for LSU. They got dudes all over the field, and they got a lot of speed. That's been something Brian Kelly has prioritized, not only in the portal, but on the high school recruiting trail as well. We want guys that can burn. If we're just faster than y'all are trying to cover us, it's going to be a problem. LSU is one of the fastest offenses you see in the country. Number two, you go defensive line. And I know this might be a hot take, and this has a lot to do with my confidence of Bernard Gooden. I know there are a lot of LSU fans that maybe are skeptical about what he can be in the SEC. I've seen some LSU fans talk about him as a rotational piece. I don't think he's a rotational piece. I think this guy can be a game wrecker from the inside, especially in the pass rush, which LSU just didn't have last year. Damn good at getting after the passer last year. You look at a guy like Savion, you look at a guy like Brandon Swinson, they sacked the quarterback 9% of the time last year. That was top 15 in the country. Didn't have as much pass rush juice from the inside of the defensive line as I think Blake Baker and Brian Kelly wanted. That's what makes Bernard Gooden's addition so big. One of the best pure pass rushers from the inside that you see in the country. And this kid showed us he can do it against the SEC. I mean, go turn on the film from Bernard Gooden playing Alabama last year, or even him playing the Miami Hurricanes last year. Like two really quality offensive lines that have really good interior groups. And I thought Bernard Gooden was very good. I don't have a huge question mark about this kid bumping up to the SEC level and being a guy. And you look at Jack Piber, and I think one of the guys that is arguably one of the most important on this roster is Pat Payton. What does Pat Payton look like for LSU? It's been a roller coaster for this cat a little bit at times during his career at Florida State. Can he play like a top 50 NFL draft pick? Look, he was projected to be a top 50 NFL draft pick 12 months ago prior to the 2024 year. Didn't exactly play like that. That's why he's now at LSU and not in the NFL. Can Pat Payton be that elite edge rusher that can let it rip off the edge? I think Gabriel Relaford, certainly an answer. Jack Pyburn sounds like he was the most impressive guy on the defensive side of the football for LSU in spring. You're a little bit deeper too. You know, Ahmad Bro, Don McKinley going into year two, probably guys you can lean on a little bit more in the rotation. I think you've heard some really good things from a guy like Sidear Mitchell being that, look, he ain't going for 10 sacks, being that dirty work two-gapper. I think this defensive line, it's a little bit deeper, and I think they brought in the guys to sufficiently replace some of the really good football players you lost from last year. If you can go one-for-one replacement with Pat Payton and Jack Pyburn on the edge, I think you're going to be better on the inside. This defensive line should be good. Number 3 quarterback, also going to slap an A-, and that might be a little low for LSU fans. I could see the argument where Garrett Nussmeier is an A. Like, at the end of the day, Garrett Nussmeier is one of the quarterbacks in this conference that we know the most about. Look, I know there's a lot of hype around Arch Manning at Texas. Think he's going to be a good football player. John Mateer at Oklahoma. Whoever's going to play for Alabama at quarterback, Ty Simpson. What I'm trying to get at here is there's not that many quarterbacks in this conference that we know can play in the SEC. Well, Garrett Nussmeier is one of those guys. Is Garrett Nussmeier going to be the best quarterback in this conference? We'll see about that because there's a lot of talent in this conference. But I think you know what you're getting. And here's the other thing. I think there's a step that can be taken with Garrett Nussmeier. My bigger question mark about Garrett Nussmeier, can it be a little bit better around him, and can the offensive line keep him clean? You know, because one of the conversations that you have with LSU is that we got question marks about the offensive line. We're going to talk about the offensive line because I don't think those question marks are as serious as many in the national media believe. But the one knock, I guess, that you have with Garrett Nussmeier and why I have him as an A-, not an A, is I think he needs some help around him. I think you got to keep him clean. I think you got to give him some good pass catchers. If you can do that, you're going to see Garrett Nussmeier have a monster season, and probably a better season than he had in 2024. And his 2024 year, as much as there were some mistakes, really, really damn good. Number 4, linebacker room, A-. I'm going to throw that star position into the linebacker room as well, but it really starts with the one of, if not the best off-ball backers in the country in Whit Weeks. This kid's special. That's probably the best way to describe him. Then you have Harold Perkins, ideally just being a little bit more comfortable in terms of how you want to use him. It's always the question with Harold Perkins. The question is never how good can he be. It's, hey, can we put him in the right spots for him to have this massive impact that we know he can? I think year 2 with Blake Baker, like having a better sense of, all right, we're Harold Perkins made the decision to come back. No doubt made that decision knowing that there's a clear plan in place in terms of how Harold Perkins is going to be used. But whenever you have a linebacker like Whit Weeks in that room, you're going to be pretty dang good. And what I'd say is, hey, I mean, like, guy like Devon Keys, I think he can play too. I think this is a deeper unit than we probably think as well. Here's a hot take: secondary B plus. If you told me this secondary is one of the best secondaries in the SEC in the middle of October, wouldn't be surprised. The reason I'm giving it a B plus is, one, look, this was a unit that was probably a C last year, and that might be a generous grade. They're massively better just from a personnel standpoint. The personnel in this secondary is much better than it was in the 2024 year. It's deeper. You're more comfortable with where guys are playing. I mean, last year, I think you had some guys that were playing a little bit out of position as well. The reason I slapped a B plus grade as opposed to a A minus or A is it's a lot of new faces. And in the secondary, look, on the defensive line, you have a lot of new faces, don't really matter. In the secondary, on the offensive line, those are the positions where continuity sometimes can matter. There's not a ton of continuity in this room, but it's a lot of guys that have played a lot of football, right? Mansour Lane, multi-year starter at Virginia Tech. AJ Halsey, multi-year starter at Houston, has played, I believe, over 1,500 snaps in his college football career. So although these guys are new, they've played a lot of football, and you feel pretty good about them kind of coming together. The reason I have them as a B plus is just because you have a lot of new faces. The personnel is way better. How good is this unit going to come together from a continuity standpoint is probably the question that you have. This secondary is going to allow Blake Baker to do what he wants to do on defense. Last year, there was like a button of heads where, like, Blake Baker wants to do certain things on defense. You just couldn't do those things because you didn't have the personnel in the secondary. So man coverage was single high. You didn't have the cornerbacks to do it. I think this year you do, and I think that's going to be a massive asset for Coach Baker in the 2025 year. Number 6, offensive line. Again, I'm giving it a B. And I think a lot of people will probably just blindly say like C. Here's the thing, and I think this unit has the ability to be better than a B too. You can't really give it much higher than a B right now. They've recruited the position well, they've developed the position really well, and they've used the transfer portal effectively. That's what it comes down to. Look, I get there are a ton of new faces on this offensive line. How's it all going to come together? Certainly a question. At this point, Coach Davis on the offensive line has earned my not respect is not the right word, has earned my trust is probably the right word, where I look at him and say, hey, you have been one of the best in the country at developing offensive linemen. You've recruited this position really, really well. I mean, you go down the list and say it's blue chip, blue chip, blue chip, blue chip guy. I know it's a lot of new faces just because you don't recognize some of these names. And I'm talking not to the LSU fans, but to the guys in the national media. Just because you don't recognize a guy like Weston Davis or recognize a guy like Tyree Adams, don't mean these guys can't play. Like, they were playing behind two of the better tackles in the conference in the country over the last couple of years. I think this unit is going to be better than most people think. And here's my question: can it be a more physically imposing unit? Can it run the football a little bit better than LSU did in 2024? You want to unlock Garrett Nussmeier, give him a good run game. They didn't really run the football as well as we thought they were going to in the 2024 year. If they can get back to that in 2025, that's going to play a massive role in the play that you get from a guy like Garrett Nussmeier. Last position on the team, gave it a B as well. Running back. The kid in Durham, I think, can be one of the best backs in the conference. I think it has a lot to do with Harlan Berry as a true freshman and Caleb Jackson. One of my biggest misses last year was the hype I had with Caleb Jackson. I thought Caleb Jackson had the opportunity to be a stud for LSU in 2024. That certainly didn't happen. And I think part of the reason LSU didn't lean on the run game was it was like Caden Durham was kind of the guy, and it was Brian Kelly comfortable giving a true freshman 20-plus carries a game? It was clearly not. I think with Caden Durham going into year 2, I think Brian Kelly's a little bit more comfortable treating Caden Durham like a workhorse of this offense. Then you supplement that with a guy like Caleb Jackson. You supplement that guy with a guy like Harlan Berry. Harlan Berry's not going to play a ton, but I do think he's going to have a role in this team because of his playmaking ability. I like the starter in Caden Durham. And if you had better depth, I'd probably give it a higher grade, but you got some question marks about, hey, how good's Caleb Jackson going to be in year 3? Because the The regression that we saw in year 2 was not ideal. And then you got a true freshman. Look, when you're talking about one of the weakest parts of your team being depth at the running back position, you're in a good spot because a lot of these other teams got some serious question marks. LSU really doesn't. The big question for me is, can the secondary be closer to an A? Can Garrett Nussmeier be an A or an A plus? Like if you get that, I don't see glaring problems with this football team. If the offensive line is good like we think it's going to be, not necessarily elite, but it's going I don't think it's going to be a liability. And you can have some of these other position groups maybe outperform a little bit and become elite. This is a team that's capable of winning a national championship. And there's not a lot of teams that can say that across the country. There are teams that can like their roster just fine. I use this analogy all the time. I'm a Wake Forest fan. I'm a fan of what Wake Forest's roster might be in 2025, but I know we ain't competing for no national championship. There's only a handful of teams that can say they have the roster to go out and win one. I think LSU has that roster. Now it's got to come together. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Hey, let it fly in the comment section. Am I too high, too low on some of these position groups? Look forward to hearing from y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.